Well, it's time to go back and focus on our junior hockey team. Still have a hard time figuring out what to make out of this team this season. However, in this recap, they have had one game where they played the best team in the league, and actually there was another trade to talk about. You know what I mean? As it's time for another episode of... Hi there, it's Brett Hornby here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Welcome back to another episode of my Calgary Hitmen in 6. This is season 4, episode number 3. As in this video, we'll take a look back on how games 7 to 12 went for the Calgary Hitmen during the 2021-22 WHL regular season. As I'm going to say, I'm actually still having a hard time figuring out what this year's Calgary Hitmen is made out of, as they definitely have been up and down throughout the season, but mostly down so far, as we'll talk about. However, there was one game that they definitely took on the best team in the league and looked alright, all things considered. So before I get into my notes, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey, home to Flames Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Stampeders, just make sure you hit like and subscribe, and also make sure to check out Brett Hornby Shorts for my second channel, where I exclusively put YouTube Shorts on there. So I appreciate like and subscribe on both channels. So let's bring up my notes and let's take a look at how the last 6 games went for my Calgary Hitmen. So for Game 7, we have to go back to Sunday, October the 24th, as the Calgary Hitmen were at home taking on the Winnipeg Kings. This was a 4 p.m. puck drop at the Scotiabank Cell, and I personally did take this game in after I finally did check out the Beyond Van Gogh before, so I finally got to do both of that. So I was at this game. So how to give recap for this one is that in the first period, I felt mostly the game was played around the boards. I mean, there wasn't many chances, few and far between, as I would say. It was slim on both sides early. But then a few more shots came later in the first period, and then actually looked like this first period was going to go scoreless. However, it was until Brandon's Ridley Gregg, who scored his 5th of the season, literally with 4 seconds to go in the first period. So Brandon took a 1-0 lead. That's how things stood after the first period. It's really tough to score another goal when you scored the first one with 4 seconds to go in the first period. So going into the second period, Calgary came back, and I felt after that first period, Calgary came back, had a better effort. Eventually, Calgary did tie it up, as it was David Andzuski, who scored his 3rd of the season, just past the 7.5 minute mark to make it 1-0 or 1-1 game at that point. Calgary then took the lead as just past the 13-minute mark. It was Anton Hedelshin who scored his 1st of the season, as it was 2-1 for Calgary at that point. Brandon then got into penalty trouble at the 15-minute mark as they took 2 separate high-sticking double minor penalties. So Calgary had a 5-on-3 for much of this time. And then on that said power play, it was Calgary made it 3-1, as it was rather Fitter Schultz who scored his 2nd of the season past the 17.5 minute mark. And that's how things stood for Calgary with a 3-1 lead after the second period. And they definitely dominated in shots, especially when you had a couple double minor penalties with a 5-on-3 advantage. Calgary shot Brandon 15-4 in the second period. Third period, Calgary was mostly protecting the lead from what I've observed at the start of the period. Brandon actually got within 1, as it was a short-handed goal, as it was Zahar Postunov who got his 1st of the season just before the 6-minute mark. So now it was 3-2 for Calgary. At that point, both sides had some chances, and remembered how quickly the third period went, because I didn't remember too many whistles. I think there was one point when I was at that game, there was like a 5.5 minute stretch that it was just passing shots, continue on. So it was a fast third period. So ultimately, Calgary won this one 3-2, and take this one 3-2 as I mentioned. Calgary also outshot the Brandon Wheat Kings 29-18. So this looks similar to what would make Darryl Sutter crack a smirk if the Calgary Flames played a game like that. Who led the way for the Calgary Hitmen was Adam Kidd, who had 2 assists. He was the only multi-point game that I'll highlight in this one. It was Braden Peters who made 16 saves for Calgary, while it was Carson Bjornsson who made 26 saves for Brendan. So that was Game 7. So Game 8, this happened on Wednesday, October 27th. As the Calgary Hitmen were still at home, they were taking on the Winnipeg Ice. This was a 7 p.m. puck drop, and this was the big test game, as I mentioned. As the Calgary Hitmen were taking on the league's top team, the Winnipeg Ice. Used to be actually in Kootenay, Haston and Cranbrook, and actually started off in Edmonton. There's some history of that, so Calgary always seemed to have had a little bit of a rivalry with the Ice, but this was the league's top team, the cream of the crop. In first period, Winnipeg started off with a major boarding penalty, as it was Connor McLennan for Winnipeg, put Winnipeg down a man in the opening minute and a half, so right away there was some physical brute force right away against the Calgary. However, while shorthanded, it was Mikey Malign who scored his 8th of the season, and Winnipeg took a 1-0 lead. So they were definitely flexing their muscle going shorthanded and scoring the first goal. That being said, Calgary actually outshot Winnipeg 13-5. In the first period, aided on that 5-minute power play that they had to start the game from that major penalty, but Winnipeg led 1-0 after the first period. Second period, Winnipeg showed they were the top team in the league by outplaying Calgary. Winnipeg did take advantage on the power play. It was Owen Peterson who scored his 6th this season past the 13.5-minute mark, so they took a 2-0 lead for Winnipeg. However, 20 seconds later, after that goal, Calgary got on the board as it was, scored 2-1. It was Blake Heward who scored his first of the season for Calgary. I was just trying to find my place in the notes here to make 2-1, and that's how things stood after the second period. It was 2-1 for Winnipeg, and Winnipeg actually outshot Calgary 17-7 in the second period alone. Third period played even up for both sides, as Calgary showed at times that they can hang with Winnipeg. Yes, we can hang with Winnipeg at some points. Calgary actually tied up the game at 2-2, as it was. I heard the name said both ways, but I guess it's Sean Tichel who scored the 5th of the season. It's not spelled that way. I heard Tessiger at the start of his time with Calgary, but I guess it's Shigel. So apologize. So Sean Shigel got his 5th of the season just before the 10-minute mark. Winnipeg took a double minor sticking penalty, opening the door for a potential upset in that game. So it's 2-2. At that point, however, after when Winnipeg killed off the double minor penalty, it was Connor Geekie for Winnipeg who scored his 4th of the season just past the 16-minute mark of the third period. Winnipeg took a late 3-2 lead. Calgary late in the period pulled the goalie for the extra attacker, but ultimately it was Winnipeg that won this one 3-2, as Calgary did put up a good fight, all things considered, I would say, given this was the league's top team. Winnipeg outshot Calgary 31-29 in this one, so it was a closely played game. So who led the way for the Calgary Hitmen was Blake Heward, who had a goal and assist. Winnipeg was led by Mikey Malign, who had a goal and assist, and Nolan Orzek, who had 2 assists. Goaltending story, Braden Peters made 28 saves for Calgary, while it was Daniel Hauser who made 27 saves for Winnipeg. So that was Game 8 against the top team in the league. So Game 9, this happened on Sunday, October 21st, or 31st I should say, as the Calgary Hitmen were taking on the Red Deer Rebels. This was a 2 p.m. puck drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome. And I would say that it was this afternoon and Halloween delight for the Calgary Hitmen, and had a quick start as it was Zach Funk scored his 2nd of the season just past the 3.5-minute mark, so Calgary took a early 1-0 lead. There was no more scoring to report in the first period, so Calgary took a 1-0 lead. Before moving on to the second period, some rough stuff happened after the 17-minute mark. It was Jason Isley for Red Deer fought with Matthew Sutter for the Calgary Hitmen, and it was Jackson Van Leest who took a cross-check penalty on the scrum. Second period, despite Calgary having a slight edge in play, in Red Deer did tie it up, hit the 1-1, as it was Ben King who scored his 8th of the season on the power play. So there's no more scoring report in the second period, so we have a tied game going into the third period before moving On to the third period. More rough stuff to end the period. First it was Jaden Gruby for Red Deer and Rutherford Schultz for Calgary. That took on the sportsmanlike penalties. However, Calgary got the power play as it was Jaden Gruby who took the extra cross-checking penalty. Third period, Red Deer took the lead as Archie Baines scored his 5th of the season just past the 5-minute mark. Red Deer now took a 2-1 lead as they have a slight edge in play for the third period. Lots of penalties in the first couple minutes on both sides, and emotions did run high. Red Deer added another goal as it was Jet Larson, who got his third of the season just past the 13.5 minute mark. So now Red Deer led 3-1. Calgary did try to get back into it as within one as Rutherford Schultz scored his second of the season just before the 15.5 minute mark. So now we have a 3-2 game for Red Deer at that point. As the period winds down, Calgary pulled the goalie with the extra tacker. However, Calgary wasn't able to get the equalizer, and ultimately Red Deer took this one 3-2. At the end of the period, it was Jaden Gruby for Red Deer and Jackson Vandalese who fought, and Hunter Mayo for Red Deer took the extra penalty, so emotions ran high for this one at the end of the game. I guess it was Halloween after all. So Calgary outshot Red Deer 33-28 in this one. Rutherford Schultz led the way with Calgary the goal and assist. Red Deer was led by Ben King and Archie Baines, each had a goal and assist. And Christopher Sedoff got 2 assists. Brady Peters made 25 saves for Calgary, while Chase Coward made 31 saves for Red Deer. So before we get into Game 10, Calgary Hitmen actually pulled off a trade as going to the Calgary Hitmen as a 2021 6th-round pick in the WHL Prospects draft. Gotta wonder when the draft is because it's fairly late in the year as is post. But going to the Vancouver Giants is Evan Toth. That was the pick that went Calgary's way. So it was just a minor trade. So that was Game 9 and the trade. So Game 10, this happened on Friday, November the 5th. As the Calgary Hitmen were still at home, they were taking on the Edmonton Oil Kings. This was a 7 p.m. puck drop at Scotiabank Saddledome. This is the weekend set that the Calgary Hitmen have with the Edmonton Oil Kings, as they will be playing them the next night. So there was definitely a lot to talk about in this game because a lot of stuff happened. And Luke Prokop actually returned to Calgary after we traded him to Edmonton a few weeks ago. As expected with this matchup, lots of physical play and offense as well. So if you like offensive hockey, this is the game for you. Scoring didn't happen until the second half of the first period, though. First goal went to the Calgary Hitmen, as was Oliver Dulk, the draft pick from this past draft. Finally scored his first of the season, just past the 9.5 minute mark. So Calgary took an early 1-0 lead. Then Calgary made it 2-0 as Rutherford Schultz scored his 4th of the season just before the 12-minute mark. However, Edmonton got on the board as it was Jacob Denmark who scored his 4th of the at the 13.5 minute mark of the first period. So now we had a 2-1 lead for Calgary. And that's how things stood after the first period. Second period, Calgary got into some penalty trouble as it was Jackson Vandalese who took a major boarding penalty, going short-handed. However, Calgary scores 2 quick goals in the first period, believe it or not. First was Blake Allen, who scored his 2nd of the season just before the opening minute and a half, and Calgary took a 3-1 lead at that point. Edmonton did take a penalty late in the first period, so it was 4-4 at the time when Blake Allen scored. However, 24 seconds later, after the Blake Allen goal for Calgary, Calgary added another one. This time they were officially short-handed, as Cale Zimmerman scored his 1st of the season at the 1:45 minute mark. So Calgary is now up 4-1 at that point. Then past the 6.5 minute mark, Calgary took a major penalty as it was Maxim Marinov checking from to the head. Then I was on that power play. It was Dylan Gunther, the player who got drafted this past draft in the National Hockey League, scored his 6th of the season just past the 7-minute mark. So now we have a 4-2 game for Calgary at that point. Then later in the period, added a couple more goals. First, it was Rutherford Schultz, who got his 2nd of the game just past the 12.5 minute mark. And Rutherford Schultz got the hat trick as he got it just before the 16-minute mark of the second period. So after that, Calgary now took a 6-2 lead at that point. Things are looking pretty good for Calgary against Edmonton. However, Edmonton did get one back, as was Dawson Self scored his 1st of the season just before the 16.5 minute mark. So that goal made it a 6-3 game for Calgary at that point. That's how things stood After a jam-packed second period, lots of physicality and goals. It was 6-3 for Calgary. Edmonton did actually outshoot Calgary 19-8 in the second period, but they had a lot of power play time with some major penalties that were taken. Third period, Edmonton did get closer to Calgary, so Edmonton did make this one very interesting. First, it was Carson Golder who scored his first past the 4.5 minute mark to make it 6-4 Calgary. Then just before the 7.5 minute mark, it was former Calgary Hitman, go figure, Luke Prokop, who got his 5th of the season. So now we have a 6-5 game for Calgary. So 6-2 1 point, now it's 6-5 for Calgary. Third period had a couple more coincidental penalties in the second half period. Edmonton kept pressing, looking for the equalizer. Clean pulling the goalie. However, Calgary was able to hang on, and they were take this one in a wild one 6-5. Edmonton outshot Calgary 45-33, so definitely was a wide open game in this one. Calgary was obviously led by Riley Fither-Schultz with 3 goals for the hat-trick. Tyson Galloway had 2 assists. On the Edmonton side of the puck, it was Luke Prokop who had a goal and assist. Guess he was very familiar with his opponent. And Josh Williams and Jalen Lupin each had 2 assists. So when it comes to the goaltending story of the game, Braden Peters made 40 saves for Calgary. He played the whole game. Well, Sebastian Cossa, another player that was drafted in the first round in the 2021 NHL draft, he made 19 saves for Edmonton. However, it was Colby Hay who took over in the third period and made 8 saves for Edmonton. So that was game 10. So game 11, this happened the next night on Saturday, November 6th, as the Calgary Hitmen and the Edmonton Oil Kings were playing each other this time up the road at Rogers Place. 7 p.m. puck drop, back at it the next night, and what's in store after lots of rough stuff the previous game? That's the question to ask. First period had a tame start by comparison to the last game, as each side only had 1 penalty in the, not until the end of the period, but each side had 1 penalty. At that point, Edmonton did score first, and the only goal of the period was Josh Williams, who scored his 6th of the season, just past the 10.5 minute mark. So Edmonton took 1-0 lead, and that's how things stood after the first period. Period did end off with a coincidental roughing penalties that carried into the second period. That's what I meant about there was only 1 penalty on both sides, but if you don't count at the end of the period. The second period, Calgary was able to get on the board as it was Zach Funk, who scored his 3rd of the season, just past the 9-minute mark, and we have a tie game. However, Edmonton did regain the lead. It was Jacob Dimmock who scored his 5th of the season just past the 14-minute mark, so Edmonton took a 2-1 lead at that point. There was no more scoring report in the second period, so that's how things stood. 2-1 for Edmonton after the second period. At the end of the second period, though, it was Keegan Slaney for Calgary took a major cross-checking penalty that gave Edmonton the power play to start off the third period. Edmonton a power play to start the third period, and they took advantage of it, but it wasn't until towards the end. It was a 5-minute major, as it was Jacob Dimmock who scored his 2nd of the game, and now Edmonton took a 3-1 lead just before the 5-minute mark. So Calgary almost killed off the penalty until the Edmonton goal. Calgary was able to get one back, as was Cale Zimmerman, who scored his 2nd of the season just before the 10-minute mark. And as the period winds down, Edmonton's still up 3-2. A coincidental double minor penalty was John Duchel for Calgary and Jake Lupin for Edmonton past the 18-minute mark. So there was some rushed up, but it's interesting now I looked at the summary that there was 2 double minors that happened at the same time, which don't see that very often. But anyway, Calgary still was able looking for the equalizer, but wasn't able to come up with it. So Edmonton won this one 3-2 to ultimately split this weekend set. Edmonton outshot Calgary 40-31 overall. Edmonton was led by Jacob Dimmock, who had 2 assists. And then it comes to the goaltending story of this one. Braden Peters, who made 37 saves for Calgary, while it was Colby Hay who made 20 saves for Edmonton. So that was game 11. So game 12, the last game that we'll recap in this episode before we move on to other business. This happened on Friday, November 12th, as the Calgary Hitmen were on the road, taking on the Swift Current Broncos. This was at the Innovation Credit Union Iplex, 6 p.m. puck drop. This is the first of 3, as the Calgary Hitmen have 3 games on this weekend set, but the other 2 games will be captured in the next episode. So Calgary did start off outplaying Swift Current in the opening period, outshooting them 12-4. However, Swift Current actually opened up the scoring, as it was Brady Bainerney who scored his 2nd of the season just before the 8-minute mark, so Swift Current took a 1-0 lead. However, Calgary was able to tie it up as Oliver Thalk scored his second of the season 49 seconds later, so that was a quick way to answer back. Just past the 8.5-minute mark, so now we had a 1-1 game, and that's how things stood after the first period. Second period, Calgary did outplay Swift Current with another period putting on more shots, 15-8. However, that doesn't matter when it comes to the score, when it comes to goals. Swift Current scored 4 goals in the second period. First, it was Sean McGinley, I should say, scored his first of the season just before the 8.5-minute marker to make it 2-1 for Swift Current. Then Owen Pickering scored his second of the season on the power play just before the 11-minute mark of the second period to make it 3-1. Swift Current got other 2 goals of the period from Josh Philmon, 6 just before the 15-minute mark, and it was Riley Gould scored his third of the season with 5 seconds to go in the second period. So yeah, it was Josh Philmon got his 16 just before the 15-minute mark, and Rylan Gord got his third of the season with 5 seconds to go in the second period. So Swift Current comes out of the second period with a 5-1 lead. Third period, both sides played evenly as this game was out of reach and no more scoring apart. So ultimately, Swift Current won this one 5-1 on the strength of the 4-goal second period. Calgary did outshoot Swift Current 26-20 in this one. Swift Current was led by Rylan Gould and Josh Philmon, who each had a goal and assist, and Matthew Ward had 2 assists. When it comes to the goaltending story of this one, Braden Peters made 7 saves for Calgary before Evan Bonaventure came in the third period and made 8 saves. So Braden Peters got replaced in the third period, while Alec Poudy, who made 35 saves for Swift Current. So that was game 12. So now if we move on to the stats and standings, well, the Calgary Hitmen, after 12 games, they are 5-7-0-0 for 12. After 12 games for only 10 points, which actually puts them 6th and last in the Central Division. So when it comes to stats, well, the leading goal scorer, point getter for the Calgary Hitmen is Riley Fitter-Schultz. At 12 games, he has 6 goals, 9 assists, 15 points. And then Sean Hichel, who had, after 12 games, he has 5 goals, 5 assists for 10 points. And then Adam Kidd, who has 2 goals, 6 assists for 8 points. Third in scoring after 12 games. And then after 4 games, fourth in scoring is Zach Funk. 12 games, he has 3 goals, 4 assists for 7 points. And then rounding out the top 5, we got a tie. He's got Blake Allen, who has 2 goals, 3 assists for 5 points. And then he also got Tyson Galloway with a goal and 4 assists for 5 points. So that's the quick scoring when it comes to the Calgary Hitmen. And then when it comes to the goaltending, it's funny how the WHL website, doesn't show all the stats for the goaltenders, but when it comes to Braden Peters, he has played in 12 games. He's definitely played the bulk of the games. He has 5-7 record with 1 shutout, but he has a .369 goals against average and an .880 save percentage. So that's pretty much the only goaltending that is worth noting. I mean, you got Ethan Bonaventure, who just made his brief appearance, and you have a brief appearance by Alex Garrett, and then Jack Manon, who is also not with the team anymore. So that's the quick stats part. Standings, well, let's take a look around the league to see how teams are shaping up as we're a dozen games in. Starting out west in the U.S. division, you got the Seattle Thunderbirds. They are the top in that division. After 13 games, they got 21 points, but the Everett Silvertips, after 11 games, they have 21 points, and they have not lost in regulation. Then you got the Portland Winterhawks. After 14 games, they have 11 points. So you got Seattle and Everett, top 2 in the U.S. division. Then you got Spokane Chiefs. After 12 games, they have 8 points, and then the Tri-City Americans are in 5th place. After 11 games, they have 6 points. So that's the U.S. division. Then when it comes to the BC division, we got the Canada's Blazers. After 14 games, they have 24 points, and they're well ahead. Second place is the Kelowna Rockets. After 11 games, they have 15 points. Third place, Vancouver Giants. After 12 games, they have 15 points. Prince George Cougars, after 14 games, they have 12 points. And then the Victoria Royals. Out of 14 games, they only have 4 points. So that's the BC division. Going out to the Eastern Conference in the Central Division, where the Calgary Hitmen are. Leading the way in the Central Division after 19 games. So Red Deer's already played 19 games. They have 25 points. They are in first, and then the Edmonton Oil Kings, after 17 games, they have 25 points. So Red Deer and Edmonton are the top two in the Central Division. And then the Swift Current Broncos, after 15 games, they have 13 points. And then the Medicine Hat Tigers, after 13 games, they have 11 points. And then the Lethbridge Hurricanes, after 14 games, they have 10 points. And the Calgary Hitmen, although they've only played 12 games, so I think part of the reason that we are last in the Central Division is we have games in hand with 10 points. And then the last division is the East Division, which I mentioned is where the Winnipeg Ice is. They are in first after 16 games. They have 30 points. They're 15-1. So you got the Winnipeg Ice and the Seattle Thunderbirds and the Canada's Blazers. They're with the Red Deer Rebels are all the top division leaders right now. And then you got the Saskatoon Blades. After 16 games, they have 23 points. And then you got the Regina Pats. After 15 games, they have 12 points. And then you got the Moose Jaw Warriors. After 14 games, they have 12 points. And then you got the Brandon Wheat Kings. They're in 5th place. After 16 games, they have 12 points. Then the Prince Albert Raiders. After 15 games, they got 11 points. So that's the quick standing story. Just go to hitmanhockey.com or WHL.ca if you want to stay up to date on any more information. I can only try to cram so much as in on these videos. So now we're done the stats and standings. Now let's take a look ahead to the next 6 games for the Calgary Hitmen, what the next 6 games have in store. Well, Game 13, this happens on Saturday, November 13th, as the Calgary Hitmen will be taking on the Medicine Hat Tigers in Medicine Hat. This will be at the Co-op Place at 7 p.m. puck drop. And then Game 14, to round up the 3-game weekend set, on Sunday, November 14th, as the Calgary Hitmen will be at home against the Medicine Hat Tigers. That will be a 4 p.m. puck drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome. And then Game 15, this will be on Friday, November 19th, as the Calgary Hitmen will be on the road. They'll be taking on the Red Deer Rebels. This will be at the PV Mart Centrium, 7 p.m. puck drop. And then on Game 16, this will be on Saturday, November the 21st. So the next weekend, Calgary will be totally on the road, as they will be taking on the Edmonton Oil Kings. That'll be a 4 p.m. puck drop at Rogers Place. And then Game 17, this will be on Saturday, November 27th, as the Calgary Hitmen will be at home, as they will be taking on the Saskatoon Blades. That'll be a 1 p.m. puck drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome. And then on Sunday, November the 28th, well, the Calgary Stampeders won't be the only team taking on the Regina-based team on that day, but the Regina Pats will be at home at the Scotiabank Saddledome. That'll be 11 a.m. puck drop. So definitely a lot more road games ahead for the Calgary Hitmen, but they had a lot more home games, I would say, in the first dozen games. So yeah, this is it for my Calgary Hitmen in 6. Looking at games 7 to 12. I'm going to still say it's pretty much a mixed bag for this episode, and just temper expectations with this being junior hockey. I'm sure I'll eventually catch a couple more games throughout the season, during the season for Calgary Hitmen. I mean, I have already caught 2 games live, and I definitely would prefer the 2 p.m. puck drop on Sunday as opposed to 4, but I had something else lined up on the last game that I checked that made it work out for me to go to the 4 o'clock game. But that's all I have. So as I like to say, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey, home of the Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, Stampeders, also do talk Calgary sports on my YouTube channel, recapping games and stories like this, for example. But I also do a variety of non-sports content when I have time, like personal vlogs, attempt to comedy, and I also do share my experience with them on the road or at a sporting event. And I do a little vlogging to go on the side, but I haven't had as much time to do that, and depends on if I'll have time to do it in the winter. So if that all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, to follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey, you know what to do. Just make sure you like and subscribe. I also have my other social links down in the description below, and don't forget I have my second channel with Brett Hornby Shorts, where I put my YouTube shorts on that channel. So I was going to say, let's go Hitmen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.